Right, I'm the Director of Communications and Membership at Bond, and we're delighted to be here again with another webinar with our one of our core partners, Key Travel, who we've been working with for many years, through thick and thin, through periods when there was no travel and when people were returning back to travel, and they've been really helpful for us in terms of supporting our members with the changing advice around the changing landscape of travel and how to travel effectively, efficiently, how not to travel, when not to travel, and we're delighted to be borrowing their expertise again with our own partners and participants as well, looking at the issue of travel and risk. Seems to me that increasingly our members are working in contexts, particularly humanitarian contexts, which are increasingly difficult. There seems to be so much more conflict around the world, and so many more reports of INGO workers being harmed or killed. And how you travel safely, how you manage risk is going to be at the heart of this session today. So anyway, Paul and the team will tell you more in detail about that. Just a few things from us. There are captions available if you want to use the captions. They're at the bottom of the instruction bar. The session is recorded, so you can you'll get the details of the presentation afterwards. And if you want to ask questions, please just drop them in the chat box, and we'll come to those. Depends. We'll come to them either during the session or at the end of the session, whichever seems most appropriate. So please do ask as many questions you like. Make use of Paul's expertise, Paul and his team's expertise. But over to you, Paul, for sort of setting the scene for this session.
Great, thank you, Mike, and thank you again. We appreciate Bond's support in organising today's webinar, and everybody for attending today's session. Whilst looking at travel, we put a panel together that includes a team from Key Travel, which is myself, Paul Green, UK Commercial Director, Paul Buller and Heidi Coley as an account manager, Paul's head of account management. And together we'll give you a brief insight into strengthening organisational travel risk processes. I say brief because we actually want more time for our subject experts and guest speakers, David Clamp, who has direct experience of risk management in NGO organisations, and David will discuss reducing your cost without compromising on safety. And we're delighted also to add Lisa Riley as a former executive director of the Global Interagency Security Forum, GISF, if I can say that properly. And there's also a psychotherapist who will be discussing building traveller resilience and confidence in the face of uncertainty. So some quite interesting topic areas. And I'll now come into the main slide deck from Key Travel. Thank you. So as it appears on screen, part of my role is working with organisations across our company to bring to the surface travel risk as a topic. We run a travel risk assessment and consultancy support, and it covers a couple of areas. The first stage that I generally do is focus on defining the legislation and the context of which your obligations as an organisation, employer, whether it be volunteers or staff travelling, around health and safety legislation, corporate manslaughter, and duty of care. Thank you. I'll hand over to Paul Buller. Oh, sorry, Heidi Coley. Apologies.
Hi everyone, I'm Heidi. I'm one of the strategic account managers at Key Travel, and I work in partnership with customers and help to support risk planning and policy assessments. Okay, so we're going to look at categories of risk, and risk is very much forms part of a company travel policy, and just going to touch on 6 key areas. So there's health, security and safety, natural disasters, transportation, political and technology. I'm very quickly just going to touch on one of those in slightly more detail, and I'm going to take an example that happened in March with the Heathrow closure. So that affected, well, I think Heathrow was closed for around 16 hours and affected roughly around over 1,000 flights. So what's super important in that instance is where a customer would have risk tools in place to locate customers, but also working with their TMCs on a strong comms plan when something like that would happen. So that's just a very short example of how risk can be mitigated. And I'm going to hand over to Paul.
Thanks, Heidi. Can we move to the next slide? Thank you very much, everybody. So my name is Paul, Head of Account Management here at Key. As Heidi touched on, really, a key area of our role within the account management team is risk management. And we've spent much of the last few weeks tweaking, updating, and enforcing and removing risk levels for some of the impacted areas for the Middle East, for example, as a highly fluid environment. But what's key is to ensure that the process actually works. So if you could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we look at what we call the risk triangle. Key Travel ourselves as a TMC or any TMC, the travellers and of course process must be traveller centric, and the customers themselves, the organisations, the attendees on the call today. It has to work. So once we've looked at the legalities around risk, we've looked at the focus areas of risk. Is it actually going to work? There needs to be a clear policy. And we find that simple works best. So, maybe just a couple of levels of risk. A country could be completely restricted. It could be permitted with approval, or it could be, a simple warning or advisories in place for certain destinations as well. And the policy should be aligned also to your insurance, medical risk and travel policy. The procedures should be seamless where they can be, and they should be tried and tested as well. And we've seen this again in the last couple of weeks with the very fluid environments in the Middle East. Our customers reaching out to us almost daily. Add this destination, remove this destination. Can you tell me who's in this destination? And we respond. We also have tools in place to allow them to self-serve with much of that. Communications are absolutely key. 24/7 communications through, I think we're all aware now, there are a number of channels we can use, push through to risk management apps, email, WhatsApp, phone, for example. And not just the how do we do it, but also the who. Who's available 24/7 to communicate and ensure that there is a response to your traveller once that risk process is triggered. And really the approach must be systematic as well. It's structured, must be repeatable. There should be nothing really in the way that once you've flown through that you've gone through that process, there are any more blockers. So ensuring that process works 24/7 seamlessly and smoothly is really at the absolute core of managing risk once that process is triggered. So I'll stop talking and I will hand over to David.
That's great. Thank you very much, Paul. I think I've got 10 minutes to talk a little bit about the thing that's on most of our minds, which is how to reduce operational cost without compromising on safety. I think to give you some context, my background as I came from VSO originally and was country director and later security manager for there. More recently at Raleigh International as operations director, and that's where I came across Key Travel. Key Travel were extraordinarily supportive as we were trying to bring everybody back in March 2020 from overseas, which we managed to achieve in record time, 5 days, which was remarkable. But since 2022, I've been working independently through a network, DHC, of professionals from the humanitarian, development, and commercial security world. It's quite a broad group of people: geopolitical risk analysts. We have a medical advisor. We have ex and current humanitarian security experts, ex-military, etc., etc. But also, and this is a group I want to come back to, I act as secretariat for a group called the Security Focal Point Network for the UK. And this, I think, is quite a useful tool that may be of use to some of you. In fact, I can see in our list of attendees, we've got a couple of members here, which is brilliant. So on that slide you've got there, you can see some of our consultants, some of our the organisations we're working with. Obviously, we've got a website. You can find out more about what we do. But let's get on with the the issue, reducing operational costs without compromising on safety. I have heard from so many organizations, pretty much every organization, safety is our number one concern. Some people mean it and they deliver it. Some people mean it and they keep their fingers crossed. This year, as Mike said at the outset, we've particularly had to run lean as a sector, and we've always run lean in the past. DHC has certainly had more people approaching us this year, asking us how they can reduce their operational costs. And so I'm just going to run through a couple of things that we have come across. I would say preparedness, of course, is critical. From my rally experience, it's not just the risks that you are ready for. You can have everything in place, but the unexpected will still occur. For instance, in that situation, a traveller who came out with an undetectable illness that manifested itself in an overseas environment that led to critical illness needing to be provided in a very, very rural location. All of the systems we had in place to prepare for that didn't allow us to foresee it, but we had the systems in place. So let's have a look at what the costs are that we're talking about. I think there's two main types of costs. One is the running cost of an effective travel management system. The second, of course, is the cost of sorting out an incident when everything goes wrong. So just having a quick look at the first of those running costs, I think in our experience, we see organizations who have insurance, which is critical and the first thing that needs to be put in place, but have limited processes or understanding of how that insurance actually works when it's needed. There can often be a stopper within the finance department who are negotiating the insurance, but without necessarily that communication with the people who are going to be using it or needing it. And that's a key area that we need to address. There's often among the travellers a sort of limited understanding of that, or so a limited understanding of the contexts that have been worked in for a long time. We heard earlier about the need for keeping the risk assessments up to date. I think that's more true than ever before at the moment, even within a national location. There are areas of higher risk, but of course we also have to look at our own vulnerabilities and the profiles of people who can get find themselves more at risk in certain situations, and that does take time. I think we are seeing a lot of organizations trying to empower their staff, their experienced staff travellers, to be in charge of their own travel, which is something that I think we need to be cautious about and manage, especially because the senior executives who are responsible for their duty of care often have gnawing concerns about people traveling. So that's an area that we've been talking to organizations about how to manage. It's great now that we have so many automated systems maintaining travel management. I have found some smaller organizations who don't have those systems set up as they should be, or maybe they're set up initially, but they sort of, maybe the numbers don't work after 6 months, or maybe the up-to-date information is not being linked to, or very generic information is being linked to. And of course, as we're all aware, there are more higher risk locations in the world, and there are more previously safe countries that are seeing areas of higher risk within them as well, particularly for people with certain profiles. So all of these need to be managed within the context of us trying to keep our costs down. And that's before we actually get to incident management itself. So again, just looking at what we're seeing as we are working with organizations, we're certainly seeing evidence in some organizations, but by no means all, that there may be an understanding that there is a crisis management team, but that team is very much untested, or wouldn't know what to do, or who would be on it if key people are away. So there's a need for testing there. Testing, I'll just actually say something about that, because we've run some this year. And in fact, again, looking at the attendee list, and I'm not naming names, but they can say anything if they want to. We did work with an organization in this call on crisis management testing, and it's a brilliant team bonding process to go through, but also a massive learning experience if done well. And it can be quite simple. It can just be a small desktop exercise. It can be quite a big exercise, but that's something that we can that can be delivered. We do it, and many other good organisations deliver it. And I would thoroughly recommend that you do that, because then you know where your weaknesses are in your crisis management team. We are also seeing incidents leading to legal cases. Lisa may say more about this when we get onto it, but certainly if anybody hasn't seen this, I think there's a very instructive case going on in Germany at the moment, where an organisation, Cadus, is being taken to court for duty of care failure towards two staff who were working in Syria. We can provide some more information about that, but it is instructive for the sector as a whole as to how duty of care manifests itself legally. How do you solve this? Well, I mean, there are some great tools out there, many of them actually produced by GISF, the organisation Lisa used to lead, on how to budget for security, how to set up simple systems. If you have a small NGO, we can provide a link to, or just Google for GISF. There are brilliant resources there, and they're all free. So that's one great way to keep it down. But secondly, of course, you can come and talk to organizations such as our own, and find out more about how we can support you. I think the key things that we've learned in our experience of supporting organizations, and I would recommend, is that whoever you have supporting your travelers, they need to be in touch with the travelers before they set out, while they're out, and it really needs to be somebody who knows the context. Happily, in our network, we have an awful lot of people who know the context, and because we've built them up over 25 years. The security focal point network that I mentioned, this is particularly useful tool. And if anybody's organization wants to work with other organizations in the field and learn about how they're managing risk, contact me, because I can add you to that group. It's a free network. There's no registration cost. It's just for people with security in their remit, who work and potentially travel management, who are based physically in the UK. And we do meet up every 3 months, etc. And share in a sort of a Chatham House environment how that works. I think it's absolutely critical that those risks.
Yes, please. Apologies, everybody. We're going to carry on from where we left off. So yeah, do continue, David.
Perfect. I was nearly finished, actually. I just was talking about the security focal point group, which anybody is welcome to contact me to discuss. I think a key, obviously, is building a relationship with the traveller. So it's not a chore for them, and they want to tell you if something goes wrong. That relationship, I think, is absolutely critical, and it's up to you how you manage that. But a key area is what Lisa's just about to talk about, which is training, preparing, supporting the areas. And I won't preempt any of that, other than what I've already said about just ensuring that if it does go wrong, your crisis management team is reviewed and planned and tested. And please come back to us if you'd like to know more. So I'm going to hand over to Lisa, who is going to tell us a little bit more about her side of the work that we do together.
Hi, thanks, David. Yeah, nice to see people back in the room. Sorry about the interruption. So as was mentioned before, I'm going to talk about building traveller resilience and confidence in the face of uncertainty. And unfortunately, uncertainty does make most people uncomfortable. And the best way to tackle this is to reduce the level of uncertainty. And it's all right, don't need the slides, thank you. And the best way to reduce that uncertainty is through preparedness. The more we understand, the more knowledge we have, and the more we trust in the organisation that's sending us, the less uncertain we will actually feel. So the more you prepare for different scenarios, the less impactful uncertainty will be if something happens. As David talked about, we know that money is an issue, so we're not talking about things that necessarily have to cost a lot of money. The starting point is about a good briefing, letting travellers know where they're going, what languages are spoken, what they can expect. And here, as David mentioned, if you have staff members who are happy to feed back after a trip, that then feeds into your briefing for your next trip. So you have this sort of information loop. And if you've got somebody traveling, particularly if they're inexperienced, starting that briefing from the moment the plane touches down. I'm sure many of us have got experiences of going through airports and being overwhelmed. Which queue do I join? Have I got a visa? Do I need to buy a visa on arrival? Is the man in the dirty overalls who's grabbing my bag off the carousel actually going to be trying to steal it, or is actually trying to help me? And knowing all of these starts us right from the beginning with less uncertainty, more confidence, and that sets the tone for the trip as a whole. Knowing who's picking you up, again, from a security perspective, but also from a personal stress management perspective as you arrive. Where are you staying? If you're arriving late, can you find something to eat? Is it safe to go out of the hotel to look? And this is where you might want to start thinking about sort of different risks for different personal profiles. As a woman, I don't particularly like sitting in a restaurant eating on my own. And I'm certainly not comfortable going out into a city I don't know, trying to find a restaurant that I would feel comfortable eating in alone. So if I'm going to a city I don't know, I will often look for a hotel that does room service. And I was talking to a couple of guys in the sort of the security cadre, and they were really shocked. And someone said, well, the last time I used room service was when it was on my honeymoon. So it wasn't even occur to them to think that other people might not be comfortable wandering around the city looking for somewhere to eat. So start bringing in that, who do we have? Who do we include in the briefing? And making sure that the briefing itself is done in a way that's inclusive, and you're not looking at the person in front of you for that briefing and making assumptions about who they are and just including that information in the briefing. If you're traveling to somewhere like Uganda, where it is illegal to be gay, you might want to think about the language you use if your companion is gay that you're traveling with. So don't make assumptions on just providing information to the person who you think you've got in front of you. And then sort of beyond the briefing is training. Again, it does have a cost, unfortunately, but personal security training from a one-day awareness can really help all the way through to the heat, the hostile environment awareness training, which is the full sort of 4 or 5 days with scenarios that you act through. And this is great to help you understand what might happen if something goes wrong. But what's really important in those trainings is it's about understanding yourself and your own reactions to situations. If you know what your threat reaction is, how does your body respond? Do you get a feeling in your gut? Do your shoulders tense up? When that happens to you in the field, if it happens, you will understand why it's happening. So there will be less uncertainty. One of the things David and I do, and I'm sure there are others who do this, is we offer a virtual reality component within the security training. And this allows participants to have an immersive experience without the cost of the full heat course. And again, it's really good for allowing you to understand, how do I react in that stressful situation? And it's interesting when you do that is you find out things that you might not have thought about. And we did one training with frequent travellers. And what surprised a number of them was that the stress was not about the country they were going to, because that they knew. It was about the people they were leaving behind, what was happening to their family, what would happen to their family. So knowing what those triggers are likely to be enables you to reduce uncertainty. You also want to think about building trust in the organisation, and a lot of what David was talking about in terms of making sure you've got crisis management response sort of sorted out. Because if you know that your organisation is capable of looking after you if something goes wrong, that also reduces the uncertainty. It gives you more confidence to go somewhere if you know someone's got your back. You might also want to think about training for the people who are actually booking the travelling and organising the trips. What do they need to know? What questions should they be asking the travel agent? What time of travel? Is it safe for somebody to arrive in a certain context at 2 o'clock in the morning? We've talked about hotels and DEI and things you might want to consider. Again, insurance has been mentioned, knowing what it covers. If somebody comes to you and they've got a trip to Bangkok, they're due to fly home on the Friday, they ask to stay until the Monday. Does the insurance actually cover that weekend when they're on holiday? You need to know. I wrote a blog a while ago for Bond on mental health coverage in insurance, and so it's really important to know these things and know what's missing, so you can travellers can have informed consent, knowing what's there. And where are documents kept with emergency information, particularly if something happens after hours? While I was working in Afghanistan, we had 3 people who were due to arrive from headquarters. They weren't on the plane. Obviously, this was quite worrying. I rang my line manager because I had no contact information for these 3 people, which throws up a whole load of other issues around travel preparedness. But my line manager said to me, "Oh, I don't have access to that information. It's only 6 o'clock here. Can it wait until 9?" As you can imagine, my answer was no. So think about what happens. Crises never happen in office hours. The other thing that really increases our sense of uncertainty is if we feel isolated. So there was people mentioned, Paul, I think, was talking about, that communication, that seamless emergency response. If something happens, knowing where you reach out to. Who do you communicate with if it's not an emergency, but you're not quite sure? Something's bothering you and you want to check it out. Where's that communication? And creating connections pre-travel. Who are you traveling with? Who are you meeting when you're in country? Do you know them? Have you had conversations with them already? Reduces that uncertainty, builds confidence. If you've got internationals traveling, are there internationals of similar personal profiles actually in country that they can talk to? If not, do you have connections with other organisations? And this is where David was talking about the UK SFP group is a great place to reach out and say, we've got travellers going to country X. Can somebody else share their information or knowledge on that area? And if you've got non-Brits travelling, the UK embassies don't care whether you're travelling or not to those countries. Other countries have different systems. So if you've got American or German travellers, I think they all have a sort of a registration process that the older ones, the audience might remember that the UK used to do. I actually had a Polish colleague. When we notified the Polish embassy, we were actually invited to afternoon tea because they had so few international travellers there. So think about the nationality of those travellers and all of these things, because really the best way to build resilience and confidence in the face of uncertainty is to actually reduce that uncertainty. So think about ways that you can do that. So on that note, I will hand back to Michael.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lisa. That's really insightful and helpful. So we've got some questions, which unfortunately we lost a couple of them during that sort of brief electrical storm that happened to our systems. So there was a there was a question from David Hampson about which I've lost in some detail, but about well-being across the sector outside the sort of organisational structures where individuals might not necessarily find that their own organisations are the best place to provide that sort of sense of well-being, and seeking external advice outside their organisation. Could people comment on that and what they see in that kind of way? Where are people looking for that sort of well-being support? And you know, why is this sort of why the sort of trust deficit, really, I suppose, within their own organisations? Can you shed any light on that?
I would definitely like to answer that question.
Yeah.
There often is a lack of trust in organisations. And I mean, to be honest, what started me on my mental health recovery journey was my organisation at the time had an opt-out rather than an opt-in process. So anybody who came back from a high-risk environment, and an appointment was made with their mental health providers, and you could opt out of it. But I didn't. And I'd been offered in the past when there had been incidents I'd been involved in. And I was given all of the information on the organisational mental health provider, but it was up to me to make that choice. And I went, oh, no, I'm fine, which is the normal response that you get within the sector. So an opt out rather than an opt in can be really helpful. If anyone's looking for a psychotherapist, I'm available. We'll leave that short advert. But what some organisations do, which I think is a really good approach, is rather than having a company that offers an employee assistance program, they compile a file of individuals like myself and others who apply to be on that, and it can include different nationalities, different languages. And then individuals have a choice. They can go through that list and reach out individually to the psychotherapist, and then actually have more confidence because they create a one-to-one relationship that the organisation is paying for. So the organisation may well say, we'll pay for X number of sessions if you select. So there are different options out there. And the more we talk about mental health, sorry, I'm on my soapbox, I can go now forever. The more we talk about mental health issues, the less will be that trust issue, and the more that people might be willing to sort of reach out and get the care that they need.
Right, thanks, Lisa. Anybody else want to come in on that, or shall we move on to another question? David, do you want to come in?
That was a fabulous answer. I couldn't add anything to it other than to say that I think the principle of ensuring that everybody has the opportunity to follow up whatever support they may need, no matter what sort of element or reflection of diversity that could be, I think is absolutely critical. So ensuring that everybody has access to information about what risks might be different, for instance, for people, LGBTQ plus travelers, to any nationality that may be of particular vulnerability in a location, whatever that person brings, we need to be able to discuss that.
Thanks, David. And Lisa, you touched on the sort of I suppose it's the individualized approach, isn't it? Sort of not making assumptions, so that how lone travelers might perceive situations or how they might behave. But just could somebody just talk a bit about with this the INGO world, you assume that everyone's kind of super experienced, but somebody has to start. Everyone has to have a starting point with the travelling, particularly to locations with increased risk. So how do you go about preparing inexperienced travellers to prepare for travel to those kinds of places? What do you need to think about when first initiating people into this sort of world? Paul, do you want to go? Yeah,
I've just had a couple of things. Thank you, Michael, and some good answers there from Lisa and David. So what we try and encourage people to do is think door to door. So when you leave your home to when you return home, and every step in between has an element of risk, whether you're a seasoned traveller, as is referred to, or a lone traveller and inexperienced. So it's thinking about the individual's journey through that process. And when we're doing some pre-work to this, Lisa very much talked to building resilience rather than fixing stuff at the end. So building resilience before travel through confidence and ability to navigate things, have them systematic, is very much part of our thinking and our engagement with customers. And it's also the same for experienced travellers that may turn off their travel awareness radar when they're travelling in Northern Europe or North America, for example, and ignore the risks that could happen in those environments because they're conditioned to higher risk activity. So there's a couple of thoughts in there to stimulate the conversation. I'll be quiet now and see if Lisa or David want to come in.
I think I would just add, starting the journey, I think it's really important that all of us have had to start the journey at some point, and I know I certainly did. And the best thing for me to learn about risk management in this particular sector was to talk to other professionals. So I have just popped into the chat in reply to somebody the contact details for that focal point group, but this is a great network of peers who can tell you their experience as well. But then going on to how to introduce any individual to these conversations, I think I talked a lot about trust and building that trust as you're building pre-departure a relationship with them. If they do have a focal point within an organization or whatever organization you have providing support, I think making that a genuine two-way relationship actually adds something and makes people more likely to tell you when something has gone wrong. I think we are all aware of cases where people haven't actually disclosed something that happened to them while they've been traveling. And we all know how essential it is that people do. And I think if you do have that level of trust working, and different people need different kinds of people to talk to. So there needs to be a little bit of flexibility on that. But I think that can help. That relationship can really help hugely.
And if I can just add to that briefly, I think what David was talking about is also think about a debriefing. So going beyond just reporting of incidents, but near misses, feelings of being uncomfortable, what worked, what didn't work. So building a debriefing process into the travel loop can be really helpful because that then helps you to actually understand the context a bit more. And providing an opportunity as part of the training we do, I don't want to give away trade secrets, but it's really fun to get people to take on a completely different profile to themselves, thinking about ethnicity, religion, possibly disability, sexuality, and then thinking about the journey, wearing that hat rather than the one that they normally look through. And that can help build the discussions without expecting people to tell you everything. They might not want the organisation to know whether they require certain medications, whether they have mental health issues, what their sexuality is, because there's a fear that that might impact their ability to get work. So creating a space for open discussions where people don't have to actually say, this is me.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm going to slightly change tack here. I've got a couple of questions about risk assessment, risk appetite. So Kasim has asked us, what would you say individual risk assessments are as important as a location-based risk assessment, especially if something crops up in their medical form? Now, who's going to give that one a go?
I mean, I can start off.
David, no, go for it, David.
Yeah. I mean, a short answer, I think, is that a good location risk assessment will actually reflect, as we were just saying, it could apply to anybody. So it will point to the fact that people potentially in a particular group might suffer, be more picked out, might be more visible. People with particular medical conditions might need to be aware of certain things. So I think where the organisations we work with who've got this nailed down the best are the ones who have good, readable, brief, but effective and inclusive risk assessments that cover everybody. That will enable a conversation then to happen between, hopefully, the person who's actually supporting the person travelling pre-departure, so they can go, okay, you've seen this. Is there anything that you want to talk about as a result? And then you're putting all of the information in front of them, rather than saying, okay, we're doing a risk assessment for this person, which can also be done, but it tends to be a little bit more time. Well, it takes up a lot of time. I mean, we do that for some organisations, which is great because then we go into, what's visible online for that particular person and how relevant might that be for a particular country. But you might not want to do that level of intrusion for all of your members of staff, but it can be done.
Anybody else want to come in on that one?
I'll add just a couple of things, I think, and thank you, David, for that answer. A quick example might be a group or field trip where there's a couple of people that are managing the group, and then there might be students or volunteers travelling with the group organisers. So both cohorts will have very different needs. So there's a consciousness level with the group organisers where they are looking across a cohort of students or volunteers that might be mixed age group, mixed experience of travel, but are on an exciting adventure, for example. So they've got to be the grown-ups in the room whilst still enabling fun and the adventure to have an impact. But that brings about two different types of thought processes, going back to the individual risk assessments. What are their stress responses? How experienced are they? What processes have we got to support them? And for the volunteers or students in this example, what their needs may be with hidden disabilities and other things to consider. So to Lisa's point, putting yourself with the hat of the cohort of student or volunteer travellers and encouraging the organisers to not think generically, be conscious of their biases to one direction or another in terms of risk response, and helping them surface those things in a way that gives that sense of control without limiting the experience that they're about to travel on. And one of the things that we do from a technology standpoint very quickly is we can have risk alerts and situational updates sent to everybody on the group or just to the group organisers. So they can then control the risk exposure, control the risk management, and have a sense of individual responsibility. But that again, depending on the group type, where they're travelling and the makeup of what the experience might be in terms of risks. As a quick example, hopefully that was helpful.
So I'll just add something very quickly. Resources into the briefing so individuals can explore more for themselves is also really important. Like the US State Department has a website that you can check whether your medication is legal in the country that you're traveling. And there are all sorts of specialized sites for travelers. So giving more information so people can explore for themselves is also important.
Right. Andrea's asked a really quite a tricky question. Very short, but very tricky question. But what makes a good risk appetite statement? Anybody hazard an attempt to answer that?
Wow, it varies an awful lot. So I think if I'm talking about perhaps a low risk travel program, low risk by definition is general travel, but not traveling to high risk destinations. So research travel or academic travel to conferences, that type of thing. The risk appetite bar tends to be quite low in terms of that process. But on the other hand, a risk appetite statement for somebody like Save the Children International, for example, who are working in Yemen and Gaza and places like that, that appetite is set very high. I think where we come in, and I'd ask David and Lisa to comment here as well, where we come in, it's setting the rules and structures and procedures that Paul talked to around that so it's systematically deployed. So whatever the appetite is for the type of traveller or destination can all be tailored to meet the particular appetite statement that that the organisation has. I've got some crazy examples of things that customers tell us about. So a couple of volcanologists phoned the organisation from the Icelandic volcano, the Rim. Oh, we're here, by the way. We just happen to be close enough to get access to the volcano. Are we insured? Question mark. What's there on the rim of a volcano that's erupting, which was fascinating for the travel manager to think about. But I'll park that and go to the more serious end of the statement with David and Lisa if they want to come in.
Yeah, no, I'll come in first. I mean, the volcanologists there, I hope they have a very healthy relationship with their broker and insurer, because certainly in my experience, it's that's such an important conversation to have for your insurer to actually understand what level of risk you're taking. And it's better to be open and honest about what you're doing and the mitigations that you have in place, because those guys might have everything that they need to work on the rim of that volcano. So in which case an insurer might be comfortable with that. But as long as that conversation is happening. I have helped organizations develop risk appetite statements in the past, and in my experience, it's got to be something short but that actually that can be shared and isn't just owned by the board of the organization, which unfortunately is where it tends to end, can be understood and actually means something, because when you start writing things down, people will generally be legally minded and more risk averse. So it's very few organizations who will actually say, no, we are prepared to work in high risk locations. And I think it's also a good risk appetite statement points to who can take a decision at short notice. So in other words, is it actually the travel risk management? Can they make a call and say, no, don't go there today? And how do you actually manage that? Lisa, you've been doing some work recently on this. I don't know if you want to reflect on some of the conversations you've been having.
I think what I'd say is, I think to build on what's been said, is link the statement to the objective of the organisation, so that staff know why their risk appetite is there. And if you've got an organisation which is dual mandate, making it clear that the risk appetite may well be different for life-saving programs, and define what is a life-saving program, and development programs. So your risk appetite statement very much linked to the objective of the organisation, and reflecting that it might be different for different types of programs that you do.
Just out of interest, do you see organisations stepping back from, once they've assessed the risks and they see how potentially high those risks are? Do you see organisations stepping back from that because of the exposure that they might be putting themselves to? David's.
I was just working with an organisation actually who asked us to do a particular risk assessment for a group of young people they were taking to an area close to the Indian-Pakistan border. This was a couple of months ago, and they wanted to get a really good assessment of that location so that they could reassure stakeholders, parents, the young people themselves about how it is. We did it, and they took one look at it and said, right, we're definitely not going there. We're going to go to this place instead. And I suddenly thought, thank goodness you didn't ask me to do something as in depth for that location, because you would have made exactly the same sort of decision. But it's the right question to ask. I think people are looking more carefully and asking more questions, and it is possible to that's a good process of getting to a risk appetite for an organisation. Sorry, Lisa.
I was just going to add to that. We're actually seeing a different thing at the moment with budgets being so tight, and there actually being, in a lot of cases, more money available for those frontline humanitarian programs. We are seeing organisations actually taking more risks than they have in the past. And this is something if this is something an organisation is considering doing, is making sure that you've done the risk assessments beforehand. I think David mentioned the boiled frog, and sometimes people don't notice that the contexts are actually getting more risky because it's a slow increase. So making sure that you've got indicators of change, and that you do actually have practices and policies and plans that are appropriate to the context that you're in is so important. And yeah, and with the budget constraints at the moment, we are seeing more people going into those frontline responses.
To add, if you don't mind, there's an emerging trend of IT risk security. So providing people with clean laptops and clean mobile phones with no commercial intellectual property or other pieces on it. And there's an awful lot of work being done on social media pre-travel. So that's heightened with the recent changes in North America, but more widely, opinion sharing and comments on social media with historic references are encouraging organisations to talk to individuals travelling for research or other topics where they might consider amending social profiles or changing social, having a dual profile, if you like, one public and one commercial, one role related, as it were. So that's the edge of things that are starting to change now. To Lisa's point, particularly in commercial organisations that carry high levels of IT or security risk through their mobile and IT devices.
And just to add to that, Paul, as well, another kind, I think, developing area we've had flagged regularly is gender identity, where passports don't necessarily reflect an individual's identity, but the destination you're visiting is not so flexible. We've talked about Uganda already in terms of homosexuality. There are destinations, of course, globally where a trans identity may result in friction at the border, attention that's completely unwanted, unwarranted. And we work with organisations and other TMCs do, of course, to help the travellers understand why that's the case, that it is, and why actually, if you intend to travel to that destination, we need to think carefully about the information that's being transmitted to that destination through the suppliers, etc. So there are many nuances around, and many destinations, of course, are more up to date, more flexible, and allow for these identities and changes. But of course, there are certain areas that will not, and perhaps again it may be illegal and expose that traveller to considerable risk. So just more food for thought.
Thanks, Paul. I just wanted to go on for past the hour for a few minutes because I just wanted to. There's a question that's really important that I wanted to ask, which is about the internal resourcing of this. We've got a lot of small organisations and members. They may not have a specialist looking at risk or travel booking or how can they, what resources are available to them or what support's available to them to do this kind of risk assessment successfully. If you've not got a specialist department, if you are a small organisation, but you're still travelling to some of the sort of, quite difficult places, what would your advice be to those organisations to how to approach that type of risk management?
I talk from a travel management company for a perspective.
Yeah.
All travel management companies should provide a level of access to pre-trip advisories, destination-specific insights, and also provide live situational alerts through technology solutions, but also have full 24/7 crisis support. So to one of Lisa's points, I just don't feel comfortable at the hotel that I pre-booked. It looked okay on the website. I've arrived. I'm not happy. I need to change accommodation. So the travel management company would be best placed to support that, but also advise the organisation that a near miss or an uncomfortable situation was experienced by a traveller. So that's one example. There's also very many of the foreign offices. So the German embassy, the Australian embassy, and the US embassy, along with the UK, are all very good sources of information and pre-trip advisory, along with any particular favourite tools that you might have. There's a number of different search options available, but that would be my basic. So start with the TMC, then look at specifics in terms of the embassy of the region or area you're travelling to.
Maybe I would also add there's some great resources out there for small organisations. That GISF did one themselves on managing security for a small organisation, which is available, downloadable free from the group. There's the network that you can join and just come and share and ask stupid questions. We absolutely encourage that at the SFP, and I think the email address has gone out. It's a very collaborative sector. I mean, this webinar, I think, is evidence of that. We all try to work together and recognise that ultimately we're all trying to protect all of our people.
Thank you, David. I think there we must end it, but thank you very much, particularly to David and Lisa for their contributions and their wisdom, but also to the rest to Paul and the rest of the Key Travel team, because I think we've got lots of questions and people have been stayed on throughout, even through our commercial break. And Paul, did you want to say a few final words?
Really appreciate people taking the time today to attend. There's going to be lots of follow-up questions, I'm sure. Bon will also collate all of the questions and answers, and will provide any additional resources and links as appropriate. But please feel free to reach out to the contacts that have been provided or the team at Bond, and we'll happily follow up and support any aspect of your particular area of interest or need here. It doesn't matter if you're not a Key Travel client or if you are. We're very agnostic in the context of risk. As David said, it's very collaborative, and we're about supporting a community out there in the world that do good.
Great, lovely, great to hear that. And I've got a contact with David. Where is he? Hampson. So we're going to talk about his network or his ideas around a network later on. So that's another plus. So thank you very much again to everybody, to the Key Travel team, and to Lisa and David, and for everybody taking part. Thank you. I'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.